The number 2 medicine till 1901 was marijuana. Morphine replaced it in 1861 for the battlefield by being able to give injections to people in severe pain right away. Then aspirin replaced marijuana as the number 1 medicine in America in 1901, Bayer Aspirin Company. And marijuana slowly began to fade out through the 20s and 30s. It was very useful for certain things. All this time, and they wouldn't know until 27 years after it was outlawed in 1937, they wouldn't know until 1964 what the active ingredients in marijuana were. It was very strange. In this long history of marijuana, not one human being is ever recorded any place of having such a reverse reaction to marijuana that they died. There was just nothing to show any harm from marijuana other than saying that some people got, the first time or two, got a little bit weirded out. And they didn't seem to think much of that as a problem. And it gave people all sorts of appetites, got rid of all sorts of backaches, got rid of all sorts of headaches, got rid of all sorts of fevers. They gave it, instead of aspirin, for fever, to reduce fever. Sounds like a reasonable thing, because I hear there's some bad things that can happen with aspirin to reduce fever. So all this stuff, as you begin to learn it in 1973 and 74, and you begin to read United States Department of Agriculture treatise after treatise after treatise, more written in the United States Department of Agriculture about marijuana than about wheat or corn or barley, the things that you would think that would be everywhere.
It's a federal program in the Food and Drug Administration. And by simply issuing an order directing the program open, it's a federal program, he's a federal judge, direct the federal program open, include Mr. McWilliams. That's all the other people, or at least the initial 3 or 4 people in the program, were all ordered in by a court. Court's confronted with the same thing this court may be confronted with. Look, even though the federal government says there's no medical use of marijuana, we demonstrated it. We've got scientists, we've got doctors, we've got a real case. There is a medical use. So that's why that program was created. So by putting them in there, and again, that program, they produced 1,000 pounds of marijuana last year.
Before I was born, when I began to be made, I have an odd lack of a protein. When that manifests itself, it's called nail patella syndrome. That means basically I'm a little different than everybody else. But you see, that's basically what you guys are too. Everybody is a little different. That's the major difference that I have. The reason I get marijuana is because I was never treated as somebody with nail patella syndrome. I was treated generally like everybody else. So they would treat me. They would give me a handful of drugs. I'd go out and ride a motorcycle through a wall.
Oh, wow.
And they'd say, oh, you can't take those drugs. And I'd say, no shit. Or I'd fall down with, it'd have to be assisted breathing. Or just a myriad of drug effects over the years. What happened? It seems to be that I'm affected very quickly by them. So if you start me off on morphine today, in 3 days I don't feel it anymore. Huge amounts of morphine. Wow. You can give me enough to kill 5 of us and I won't feel it. I don't get high. I don't get, I may pass out. I may just get up and go normally like I would normally do and pass out. Where I don't know if that's physical or mental.
Right.
Nobody's ever tried to find out with me. And I'm not ever going to let him.
Good.
But you can give me an antibiotic and it'll have the same effect. Now, on the other hand, they did treat me with these drugs and surgeries. And I did, I did think I look a little different, but I never knew it, okay? This is hard to explain because I never realized I was any different. I thought everybody's a little different and that's the way it works. What I found out was everybody's a little different in a little different way. So when doctors start telling me this is a good medicine, I say, why? Because it works for a lot of people? Yeah! And I said, well, there's something wrong with that because we're all different. How can it work the same for a lot of people?
Right.
And that was the point I'd finally come to. That's what we finally started discovering. These drug treatments, physical therapy treatments, etc., were probably many of them were probably as harmful to me as they were helpful. The reason I get marijuana is pain, spasm, nausea. And those are all either direct effects or after effects of surgery, drugs, and treatment.
Life goes by pretty fast, and maybe I was lucky to have, almost died 3 times by the time I was 10, but I realized this is a really fragile place that we have, and one day it'll probably freeze over and we won't inhabit it anymore, and we'll probably look something like Venus or Mars, but big deal. This gift, this catastrophic gift of life we've been given needs to be appreciated, and truly, we need to come out of our own closets, be it whatever the closet may be, be it sexual orientation, be it I'm a pot smoker, be it I want to be able as an adult to make a choice between a shot of whiskey and a bud of marijuana.
But it's got to start with you. If you don't know some doctors, I'll suggest some to you. But you should know, go to your own doctor. Don't ask for a prescription. Now, these doctors have been frightened by the DEA, by General Barry McCaffrey, the drug czar out of the White House, who says he's going to take their licenses away from them to be able to dispense Schedule 2 narcotics, and they've got to have a Schedule 2 license to be a member of an HMO or to serve an HMO, and 60 to 80% of them do serve HMOs, and they can't work for them anymore if they don't have that license. And even though the DEA and the government hasn't taken away one license in California, that threat that they made 2 years ago, you might remember, it was going in January of 97, that McCaffrey said he was going to take your notes away from you. He just made the same threat to Oregon and Washington doctors.
Can you catch this fragrance of my Pall Mall? I smoke green Pall Malls.
Oh, really?
10 of them a day.
Since you've come out here to California, has it been more difficult for you to get your medication?
Totally, because doctors are tied up thinking that their licenses are going to be revoked, as Jack said in your previous interview, and that happened actually on December 27 of 1996, immediately after we passed 215 here. And I say we because I worked very hard on that initiative. I wasn't a California resident, so I was not able to vote, but heaven knows I worked getting those signatures and talking to people to make sure they did. And the doctors, this is harsh.
What's harsh? The marijuana, the government?
Unless I take it apart, put it in a baggie, take the seeds and stems out and re-roll it, it's very harsh. The paper is very bad, and
so this is actually a joint from the U.S. government here.
Oh yeah, this came to me.
And it'll actually have seeds in it.
Yeah, this particular batch, and they change. This particular batch have not had very many seeds, and the seeds that have been there are very tiny.
Let me do a close-up on that real quick.
Sure.
Here, hold it still.
Comply with federal law. Granted, the program was closed in 1992 because the Bush administration determined it sent the wrong message to children. But as I said in there, this sends the wrong message to children. The nation is not safer tonight because Peter McWilliams is suffering in his home. And even the judge, even the U.S. attorney knows that. So we're all kind of stuck in a difficult position. And again, it's most difficult for him, for Peter McWilliams.
When do you think the judge might rule?
Peter McWilliams, 1950 to 2000. New York Times best-selling author and publisher Peter McWilliams was laid to rest today. About 75 friends attended. It was pretty small and personal. It was nice, but we knew something really went wrong. Another victim caused by the war on drugs in the United States. The question is, who is responsible for his death?
Peter McWilliams went out and taught eloquently everybody that they had a right to life, a right to have fun. Judge King, the federal government, and the prosecutors of the federal prosecutors all deserve a swift kick in the ass, thrown out of society for being the worst people we've ever had, and for putting up with the stupidity about the safest medicine on earth and treating it like it's the scourge.
think has happened here today?
Well, you know, people came to honor and to mourn and to put a certain sense of closure. I mean, that's what I felt. Even though the emotions still stay, you know, the main emotions are sadness and anger. Sadness at the loss of a friend, and at the loss of all the additional material that he could have contributed to the culture. And anger because, in effect, Peter was murdered by the federal government. You know, starting at the top with Clinton and Gore and going down to Donna Shalala and Barry McCaffrey and the prosecutors and the DEA and federal judge George King, because they wouldn't permit him to smoke his medicine. If he had been allowed to, he wouldn't have thrown up and he wouldn't have choked on his own vomit. And so, you know, in many states, the severe negligence of a medical patient is considered murder too. So it's not even an exaggeration to use that word.
So do you feel in your heart as if the federal government has murdered Peter McWilliams?
Definitely. You know, it's like they executed him for wanting to take his medicine. That's what it comes down to.
Right.
And
speaking as close friends, I mean, we kind of saw him deteriorate too, just right after they told him that he couldn't have his marijuana.
Yeah.
His viral load just shot up to an incredible amount.
There will be people in the future who will look back on this and think how barbaric these times were.
Right.
You know, how insane.
Right.
It's what to some people are the good old days, to other people the dark ages.
Right. And here we have one of our greatest minds. Oh look, there's a thing over there. One of our greatest minds, Peter McWilliams, you know, had to get killed because marijuana is illegal, even though we legalized Proposition 215, California Self-Health Code 1136 2.5. He was following state law.
No, that's the slogan now is states' rights. It's not just for racists anymore. That's what it comes down to.
Oh, really? I like all these little sayings now.
Yeah, well, Peter loved that. He loved epigrams.
I ran for governor of California, and I have to say, between the process of running for office and the process of being thrown in jail, I've gotten a pretty good education about what's broken and what needs to be fixed. And I'd like an opportunity to talk to this entire country about just how broken this criminal justice system of ours really is. Tell us a little history of your how medical marijuana helped you. I was diagnosed in 1976 with terminal adrenal cancer from which no one has ever recovered and no one has ever lasted more than 2 or 3 years. I'm now going on my 20th year, 25th year, I guess it's supposed to. Yeah. Medical marijuana is the only medicine that I use. I even have received now 2 studies, one in Japan, one in Canada, where they specifically took my kind of cancer cells, treated them with cannabinoids, and killed the cells.
Because of the medical cannabis that I've been using for 31 years, I haven't developed any new tumors for 30 years.
Now that's the thing that really interests me about you, because most people use it for pain, spasm, and nausea, and of course you have that. But the fact that I believe, and they've been doing investigational work on the cannabinoids and how the cannabinoids might actually fight tumors. Has your doctors talked about this, or
no.
what do you think might be happening? Or?
I think it's definitely inhibiting it. The only real studies that I've ever seen is I saw that in fleshy tumors that cannabis would delineate the tumors, help break it up. And I've always believed that it would help also the growth, the potential growth, keeping the growth from happening of existing tumors, and I think of any potential new ones. So it definitely has worked in that respect. I can't prove it. I can prove that I don't have the muscle spasms. I can prove that I don't have the tremendous pain. I can prove that I don't have the hemorrhages that I used to have. Those I can easily prove. The rest, well, we're not sure, but the point is that the disease says I should be developing tumors at any time, and new ones should grow, and existing ones should grow, and they're not.
Hold on a second, Jack. I'm not ready, Jack.
The Emperor Jack here.
There we go. Okay, Jack. We're ready.
About 8 years ago, I got a letter and a book from Peter McWilliams telling me that he liked my book and he had concluded it in his book, Ain't Nobody's Business If You Do, and he sent me a signed first edition. And I found this guy that would fight for freedom for pot. He wasn't sick with anything then. A couple years later, I met him because Todd McCormick and him had gone into a business deal to not only report and write and publish this information about hemp, this information about pot that you could grow and you could get well, as Todd had. When he was a kid, he was given pot when he was 9 years old to stop the nausea, to get the strength to eat, and it worked. Both of them in this deal together. Peter, with cancer and AIDS, was able to hold food down. His viral load got to 0. In 1997 and 98, he had no viral load. The government arrested him a year after they arrested Todd for the same crime. They put him in jail for about 4 weeks. In that time, his viral load, which had been remaining at about 0, skyrocketed, I believe, to 400,000. He never got over that. He never got well, and then his mother had to put up her house to secure his relief from prison. And he wouldn't cheat on her because she would lose her house. And not only he would lose his house, but his mother. And he wouldn't cheat. And he got sicker and sicker. He died in the vomit. From what I understand, that's from being sick. Something he would take pot and he would not have that nausea. One of the first things we ever heard about marijuana 25 years ago was it stopped the nausea of chemotherapy, stopped the nausea of radiation. Besides multiple sclerosis, besides backaches and headaches and stress, it relieves serious symptoms on cancer patients and allowed them to eat. Besides brain tumors and strokes, and the only thing that works for it is the safest, best medicine on earth. Nobody can die from marijuana unless you're shot by a cop. Peter honored his mother, wouldn't let her take the house away from him. A friend of mine, Captain Ed Adair, was put in a hospital with cancer. And he went, his sister worked at that hospital as a head nurse. And he wouldn't go out and sneak the pot to stop his nausea because he was afraid he'd get his sister fired. He died 80 days after he found out he had cancer, but he wouldn't smoke because he loved his sister so much he didn't want to get her in trouble. I say it's time to get the government in trouble.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Nobody. In California, we passed a very open initiative. You could have cancer, you could have stress, you could have backache, and you can get the medicine to relieve you. You can have a child that thinks she's got problems. You can have an adult that thinks he's got problems. And you can choose, rather than give them speed, you can give them smoke. It's certainly an option that's safe for them to choose. It was the safest medicine in America 100 and 150 years ago. Everybody recognized it as a totally safe medicine. Today, we're still fighting the Barry McCaffreys, the Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan leftover thoughts that marijuana is going to do some harm to you. It will not do any harm to you. You live longer if you smoke pot, according to every federal study, than if you do no drugs at all by about 2 years.
and you live 8 to 24 years longer than people that use alcohol and tobacco. America spent more money on that study, $6 million in 1968 to 1974, and again in 75 and 76, in Jamaica, in Costa Rica in 1980, that you live longer if you smoke pot every day than if you don't do any drugs at all, and you live 8 to 24 years longer than people that use alcohol and tobacco regularly. So I'm sure Peter would agree with me. Todd from a cell in Terminal Island is agreeing with me to let our people grow, and to grow, it just can't be for medicine. It's for relaxation. When 52% of the budget for a drug-free America has come sometimes from the alcohol industry, then Budweiser is the company with the largest amount of money since 1935 into making marijuana legal and putting us and our brothers and sisters in jail and prison. I think we all should spread the word that Bud should go belly up.
All right.
Tell the people that smoke pot they should go out and buy Bud and put people in prison with it.